there, my name is RustyPieLover, ginger streamer, professional high-pitch screamer, podcast extraordinaire, and we're delving deep into conversations today. And I thought, how much deeper could we go than getting the glorious NicholasVanJ on the podcast?
Hey there, everybody. I'm told that I go quite deep. So here I am. Did
you like that little segue that I gave you? I could have done
Yeah,
better, but I felt like that was just on brand.
I figured out where it was going, and I was like, okay, I need to improvise here. So I did my best with the limited time that I had to think about that one.
You could easily be on Whose Line Is It Anyway? I'm just saying, improv is one of your best things.
Thank you. I do try.
Speaking of improv and acting and all those things, for those that don't know, Mr. Nick Van J is actually an actor. And I only found this out like last year, but it's actually so cool to know that I'm speaking to an actual actor. Tell us about that.
That's very generous to call me an actor. I haven't actually worked in the film industry since lockdown. But I was formerly working in the film industry as an actor for about 7 years prior. That was really cool, actually. I mean, it was kind of my dream after leaving high school. I think for a lot of people, being an actor is a big starry-eyed dream, and for the most part, it is a very rewarding and challenging profession. But I just find that the film industry, not just in Cape Town, although maybe a bit more so here, is a little bit, what's the word? Like unhealthy. I feel remiss not using the word toxic, but I don't think it's like explicitly a toxic work environment. It's very emotionally and mentally taxing. So I really enjoyed not having to go back to that when the lockdown started. And I was really lucky that at the time I had streaming to fall back on, which has kind of supplemented me for the last since lockdown started. So I don't know how many years that's been now.
It feels like an eternity already.
Yes, it really does. No, I've worked on some really cool things. My last project that I worked on, I was a member of the Morphe cast, and sorry for the South African audience members who might be taken aback by the flagrant use of the word Morphe. That was actually the title of the film, and it was actually an LGBTQIA film that was set in during the Angolan border war in South Africa. It's funny. It was adapted to film from a book that was written by a friend of mine, funnily enough. And when I arrived at the casting, the working title under the script was different. So when I read through it, I actually said to the director, I was like, "Wow, this is really similar to a book that a friend of mine wrote." And then he was like, "Yes, the book is called Morphe, and that's what this film is." So it was pretty cool.
And then tell us about that journey from going from, and I'm gonna call you an actor because it's so cool to know that I'm speaking to someone who was in a film.
It was something that I studied like in college. So I mean,
That's awesome. So what was it like from transitioning from that kind of environment to the streaming environment, and then still facing the challenges that you face being a member of the LGBTQIA community? Because like you said, that title is, it's a little bit, we don't like that kind of word here, but that.
Oh, right, it's the title of the movie.
Yes, we don't like that. But I mean, how did you transition from this environment to another environment, and then still deal with those challenges that come with being as a member of the LGBTQIA plus community? Because we are still very backwards with this, and I will 100% say that. We are still very backwards thinking in how we are supposed to be treating our fellow human and how people treat members of the LGBTQIA plus community.
It's actually really interesting you say that, because as far as the workload and my skill set was concerned, there wasn't actually much of a transition from acting to streaming. In fact, I was actually doing it parallel. to each other. So like I was streaming while I was acting. Um, and I mean, while they are structurally very different professions in terms of what I was taught to do in college, it was relatively the same. I also studied TV presentation in college as well. So streaming was more or less the same thing. It's performing entertainment in front of a camera, albeit for different different reasons, different periods of time. But yeah, it's strange though. But from the homophobia side of things, I actually experienced it's different kind of experience of homophobia, because when you experience homophobia on a film set, which I did quite a few times, surprisingly, um, it's something that is a little bit more in your face and a bit more impactful because you're dealing with real people. But dealing with homophobia from streaming, which is no less infrequent, unfortunately, it's different because you've got more, like, you can't moderate a film set. You can't ban people. I mean, you can if you're the producer, right? It's just, funnily enough, somebody did get fired from a film set once for being really homophobic towards me.
Nice.
Yeah. I
Nice.
felt I don't know why. Like my knee jerk reaction was to actually feel quite bad for him. I'll get to the story a bit later. But homophobia in streaming is a bit of a different ballgame. I'm quite because I've been quite used to homophobia like in the online space for a long time. Obviously, I've been on Vine, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all those places where that are kind of like melting pots of controversial opinions and people butting heads and forums that breed all kinds of hatred. So that kind of thing wasn't new to me. And what's really nice is that, no matter how bad it gets, and it does get really bad, you can actually just turn off your phone, or you can delete a comment, or you can block somebody. And while that offers, a small consolation, it is a consolation all the same, but you can't really do that on a film set. So for example, when I was on, it was actually the set of the Black Beauty remake that Disney did. They actually shot that here in Cape Town. And I was a member of the cast, and I think he was an assistant director, but I'm not 100% sure, who kind of inserted himself into our like kind of social circle, because when you're like a cast member on set, you kind of immediately start to make friends with your fellow cast members, because a lot of the time it's waiting in a holding room, or there are very often sets don't allow phones, all kinds of things. So you make friends, right? And this guy, I don't know what we were talking about, but I had said something that this person obviously thought was impressive, because he said to me, "Oh, I know why this guy knows the things that he does, because he's doesn't have a girlfriend and he's got his head in the books all the time," which on its own is already a really strange thing to say to somebody. Like, homophobia aside, because the homophobia didn't even occur at that point, I was already kind of like, that's a very red flag thing to just say to someone you don't know. Like, that's really kind of weird. And then everyone started laughing, and then he was like, when you can kind of tell that someone's not laughing with you, they're laughing at you. And I think he picked up on that. So he was like, "What did I say?" And I just said to him, I said, "Well, you're right. I certainly don't have a girlfriend." And I don't really know how the conversation followed out thereafter, but it became clear to him that I was gay. So he started asking me like really invasive questions, almost in like a kind of there's a phenomenon that queer people refer to a lot, called queer tourism. Where straight people like to immerse themselves in the novelty of gayness without actually giving queer topics the sort of reverence that they would give, heterosexual topics, for example. Like, you wouldn't go up to, like, for example, he wouldn't go up to a female coworker on set and be like, "Hey, do you have a tampon in you right now?" Right? That would be like a really weird thing to say to somebody unprovoked. So this guy started asking me questions about like, you know, am I a top, am I a bottom, and making me really uncomfortable. And I just said to him, because I understand that it's not something that a lot of people know is uncomfortable. Like if you are part of the other culture, it's not something that's part of your cultural spectrum to be like, oh, that might actually be really kind of rude to ask somebody. So I just politely said to him, I said, listen, I know you probably don't think about it this way, but that kind of question is like really invasive and makes me uncomfortable. So he got really defensive, which honestly is not surprising. I think that's people's immediate knee-jerk reaction to being accused to anything adjacent to bigotry. Because no one, whether you're homophobic or not, you don't want to be accused of being a homophobe. And bear in mind, at this point, I didn't say that this guy was a homophobe. I just said that his questions were invasive and uncomfortable. So so then he said to me, well, fine, just leave it, because the next thing you know, you're going to go run off to the director and say that I'm triggering you and all kinds of things. And he started using like this really kind of derogatory, stereotypical, effeminate accent. You know, when people are like, put on gayness
Yeah,
as like when straight men, when straight men put on like gayness as a performance, and I'm using air quotes here because, you know, there's no such thing as performing homosexuality unless you're actually engaging in gay sex. That's a performance of homosexuality if ever there is any. And I just looked at him and I just thought to myself, like, this guy has obviously become really defensive and thinks that this is, you know, like a real hot take here. So I just said to him, you know, I don't know why this, you know, asking for boundaries is such a controversial issue for you. I don't think you would have this kind of conflict of cognizance if you were talking to a female coworker who you just asked an invasive, sexually charged question of. So like, you know, are you okay? And then he was like, yeah, I'm okay. And then I kid you not, hey, I couldn't make this up if I tried. He faked a radio call, and radios aren't silent on set unless there's a shot, like unless people are actually taking a shot. And in that case, you know, you do actually say silence on set and people don't radio in. But he faked a radio call. And we all knew it was fake because like you didn't have an earpiece or anything. It was just the weirdest thing. And then he just fucked off. So like my friends and I are sitting there being like, what the fuck just happened? And our a cast manager who makes sure that everyone, like, you know, cast is being taken care of and stuff. He's a friend of mine. He's also gay. So I pop him a WhatsApp. We actually did have our phones on set. I don't know if we were allowed to, but we did anyway. And I just said to him, like, you'll never believe what just happened. It was the craziest thing. And up until this point, I kind of thought it was like pretty harmless. Like it was borderline homophobic, but not enough that I would make a big deal about it. I don't really give a fuck. I just thought it was really strange and a little bit cringe. So I told this guy and this friend of mine, and this friend of mine messages him and was like, did you really do this? So I didn't know that he was going to tell. I wasn't like reporting it in an official capacity. I was just telling that guy because he was a friend of mine who happened to work on set. But anyway, this guy who did this whole song and dance around me being gay comes back and then starts threatening me, telling me that he's going to make my job very difficult if I tell anyone else, and like all kinds of really weird things. I don't remember the full extent of the conversation, but I just said to him, I was like, it's very brave of you to threaten me in front of people who, like, A, are my friends, and B, you know, are capable witnesses if I actually did decide to report this. And I also said to him, and I was like, and you know what? Instead of like eating humble pie and taking the L for being absolutely cringe, you should have actually just been grateful that the person that I did tell was a friend of mine, and not your boss, who I'm actually now deciding to tell because like this is really bullshit behavior. And long story short, he actually got fired. But it was pretty crazy. And I think the funniest part of it is that I dressed this guy down very loudly in between set when we weren't doing takes. And I turned around to see, because you know when you kind of like, you really get into like when you start yelling at someone, you kind of forget your surroundings. And then when I had finished, I looked around to see who had actually like witnessed this. And the actor from the from Game of Thrones that played Khaleesi's advisor, and the little girl that played Bella and Edward's child in the Twilight Saga were standing right there having lunch and like watching this whole thing go down. And I felt so embarrassed. I thought I was gonna die. It was the craziest thing ever. But yeah, that was the last time I had ever encountered homophobia on a film set, and I was like, "Fuck this! I don't need this in my life." I actually, I was quite lucky though. I didn't have to come back to set because all of my takes were done, so I didn't have to deal with the aftermath of that. But yeah, that was that. That was the story that I mentioned.
Well, in the opinion of me, get wrecked nerd.
I realized, like, after I finished that story, I was like, wow, that was a really long story, actually.
No, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. I love it when our guests tell these stories because I just get immersed in it. I can just picture you standing there. Because if y'all have not checked out NicholasVanJ on TikTok, and I'm early plugging him, but you need to go and watch his TikToks. This is where NicholasVanJ just puts people that are homophobic in their place. Bigotry, homophobia, and he does it in such a way that makes me so happy to call him friend, because I'm just like, this is the energy that I seek to achieve.
I've had practice.
I can just imagine standing there watching this happen. Me, I'd be on the floor laughing, pointing at the guy, going, "Get wrecked, nerd. That's what you get."
I actually like it's become. I almost feel a little bit emotionally not well adjusted saying this, but it's become unfortunately cathartic for me because I grew up in a country where being gay is illegal. So like the stuff that I say online, I wouldn't be able to get away with in Zimbabwe, because it would be considered gay propaganda. They refer to it as the encouragement of inappropriate acts in Zimbabwe. It's really fucking stupid, honestly. So I don't know. For me, when I moved to South Africa, it became my little act of rebellion because it was such a novelty for me when I only really realized that I was gay. Or I didn't like. I always knew that I was different. Like I don't know. There was always this invisible. There's this unknown difference between me and like obviously straight peers when I was a kid. I only really kind of understood what gay was and identified that as being the difference in my life when I was about 11, I think, which honestly, you know, a lot of people say that's quite a young age to realize, but I think a lot of people forget that psychosexual development kind of occurs at the beginning of puberty before general sexual feelings occur, because I mean, you know, you start developing sexual inclinations around I mean, I'm not an endocrinologist, so I'm kind of ballparking it, but like, you know, your mid-pubescent stage, like 13, 15, whatnot. But your psychosexual development actually begins a little earlier. And so I realized I was gay when I was 11 because, you know, you have crushes, right? And everyone has crushes when they're like 11, 12, or whatever. And my crushes were all boys. And I realized, I was like, that's a little different from my friends, I think. And it was only when I was, I think, 15 that I actually came out. So when I was in South Africa at that time, and it was a bit of an eye-opener for me because I had realized that a lot of the anxiety that I had, a lot of the anxiety and emotional abuse that I had faced as a kid prior to that, growing up in Zimbabwe, all centered around my being queer. Because I think, like, you know, I think a lot of queer kids do exhibit behavioral differences, which is not to imply that there is a behavior to being queer or behaviors that are indicative of being queer. But I do think that there is a lot of intersection between certain non-conforming behaviors and queerness, in that, you know, I suppose one of the more stereotypical ones are include being effeminate. I was quite an effeminate child, and I got a lot of flack for that from adults and other kids alike. And I think a lot of that in in a vacuum would not have mattered, my being an effeminate child, were it not for the fact that effeminacy is tied, or effeminacy is stereotypically stigmatized as a homosexual trait, and homosexuality in Zimbabwe was viewed as uh, like an abomination. You know what I mean? So it only really occurred to me how much homophobia affected my childhood um, when I realized that I was, in fact, gay. And it's funny how that works, right? Because homophobia doesn't just negatively impact gay people, because there are a lot of effeminate children who grow up to be heterosexual adults who are also abused for for being effeminate. But the only reason people like emotionally abuse effeminate boys is because of homophobia and sexism. It's kind of like this intersectional issue. And so when I realized I was gay and I realized how much of that affected me, and also became more cognizant of how much of that culture actually affects queer communities in Zimbabwe, it became a little act of rebellion for me to, every time I saw something even vaguely homophobic on social media, I would just, like, for a lack of a better description, I would just bully the fuck out of them. And and at first it was a pretty heavy toll on my mental health. It used to make me a very angry, um, easy to upset person, and over time I became a little bit more resilient. Um, and it's funny because a lot of people say that when they meet me in person, I'm very different from how I come across on TikTok, which I'm going to take that as a compliment because I think that I come across as pretty combative on TikTok. Um, but yeah, over time, I've been doing it for years, and a lot of people ask me why and what I think I'm achieving, and I've realized that for the many years that I have been kind of, for a lack of a better description, bullying homophobes on the internet. I've realized that the real positive impact doesn't actually come from what the homophobic person takes away from the conversation, because more often than not, they're going to remain homophobic, and if anything, they're going to be even more homophobic because they feel embarrassed. But the positive impact comes from other people witnessing that, because I think in there's a lot of power in conditioning what is inappropriate behavior. For example, I read an article the other day about a woman who was walking alone in the streets, and a group of drunk men were harassing her, and one of the boys in the group actually told his friends off and was like, "This is really inappropriate. Like, I don't feel comfortable with the way you guys are behaving right now." And they all stopped and they all apologized and they all felt bad. And obviously, that doesn't take away from the fact that they harassed this woman in a way that they shouldn't have to begin with. But one person's admonishment of that behavior changed the group's behavior, the collective mentality. And I think the more people see that homophobic opinions and bigoted opinions are met with resistance and admonishment, the more people realize, A, how awful homophobia is, but B, how ignorant homophobia is. And I think that while there's definitely not a lot of question or doubt in people's minds that homophobia is ignorant, it's different to see it executed in a social setting, that kind of like admonishing someone for having an ignorant opinion. Uh, and I also think that it's very empowering for young queer people as well, because when I was growing up, I used to see those kinds of things on the internet all the time on social media. Um, I used to see it in real life. I used to see it on TV. And the thing that I never saw on social media and TV in real life was someone saying something about it, or someone taking those people to account. And it made me reluctant to come out. It made me reluctant to be more open about myself. It made me more reluctant to be authentic. Um, and it really stifled a lot of my developmental childhood, I think. And I often think that I have become the kind of person that I really would have liked to have seen as a kid on social media, standing up for people like me and also making these people that made my childhood a nightmare feel pretty stupid about themselves. So, in a lot of ways, I've been perceived to be quite harsh with homophobic behavior, but I don't think there is such a thing as being too harsh to somebody who believes that there are some people who deserve more rights and dignity than others. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that I completely understand, and these are why we have these podcast listeners, so that we get insight of and from people that have experienced these things that maybe you or I have not experienced. I mean, I underwent bullying, but not to the extent where it impeached my rights. It impeached my identity as an individual, which impeded on me growing as a human being. It's a completely different thing. Bullying is bullying, but the fact of the matter is, when you fear for your life because of who you are as a person, that's a whole different level. And to see Nick do these things where he takes the homophobes to task, it's inspirational. And a message to all of our LGBTQIA plus community members: if you ever are in trouble, contact this man. He will sort you out. He will sort you out. But then
I'm ready, hey?
Coming to that then, us, the heterosexual community, or the cis hetero. I'm still learning all my terms, so I'm educating myself, but I'm still learning all these things.
Can I do a quick interruption there? Yeah. I hear a lot of, obviously, like a lot of, even in the queer community as well, people always feel nervous about terminology and stuff like that. But the thing to remember is that terminology, especially with regards to the queer community, is still evolving, and it's okay to get things wrong and not be fully informed. The real thing to get right is being able to listen and being able to ask questions. A lot of people, I've had friends who have said to me that they recently became friends with a trans person and they're so worried about pronouns and stuff. And my advice is always not to panic and just ask. I have the first time I became friends with a trans person, for example, I remember I would sometimes use the wrong pronoun. And bearing in mind, I had never met a trans person in my life. I didn't know anything about transgender people. It was a very long time ago. And I remember her saying to me, I actually cringe a little bit when I remember this. I remember her saying to me that she could see that every time I got her pronouns wrong, that I had this face that I hated myself. And I did. I felt like I was going to die in that moment because I felt stupid, honestly. And she just said that she knows that I respect her gender identity, and it's okay that, I make mistakes with the pronouns and stuff, because she could see that I did respect her gender identity and I was making an effort. And I think therein lies the real secret, is making an effort. And obviously I don't speak for the trans community, so there are any trans people who disagree with what I'm saying are obviously welcome to do so. I don't consider myself an authority on trans issues, but that's been my experience with queer issues and lingo in general. Sorry, that was a long-winded interruption.
No, that's perfectly fine, because it kind of leads into what I was going to ask. What can we as heterosexuals do to be an ally to the LGBTQIA plus community, barring Pride Month? Because in my personal opinion, we should be allies 24/7, not 1 month of the year. That's how that works. It's the same as the whole Valentine's Day thing. Your significant other isn't only special one day of the year. Mother's Day, Father's Day, it applies. I don't know if I'm thinking a little bit too harsh, but for me, the thing is, we need to help everyone, and not because of one particular month celebrating our LGBTQIA plus community. Only then do other allies come out. So what is it that we can do to uplift and help where we can?
Honestly, I mean that's the common question, isn't it? And it's a really good question. And I appreciate you for asking that. But there are so many grandiose ways one can be a quote unquote ally, and I say quote unquote because ally is a very vague term. But really, it's not as hard as a lot of people think. Ally, I feel like ally is a bit of a misnomer sometimes, because what it really boils down to is just being a decent person. You know what I mean? Like seeing homophobia in any capacity or any context, and being able to say, "Hey, that's." Well, in my case, I'd say, hey, that's really inbred, and I think that your sibling parents should abandon you. But for a normal person,
I'm gonna die.
probably for a normal person, you'd probably say, hey, that's really not cool, and you're ignorant. I have found that sometimes I respond to homophobia with a particular level of viciousness that may or may not always be warranted. But yeah, I think it's really important to be able to just be able to recognize homophobia, and being able to do something about it. That's a really good way to show silent solidarity for queer people. And I say silent solidarity because a lot of the stuff that people are going to do to express allyship to the queer community is not going to be stuff that is public. It's not going to be stuff that people see. So that's a really good example. The other thing is being aware. The one thing I really encourage people to do, if you are a cisgender heterosexual person such as yourself, I really encourage you to engage in queer culture through your medium of choice. And what I mean by that is, if you're somebody who really likes movies or series, find a queer movie, like a queer orientated movie or queer series that's like, a good example would be the TV series Pose on Netflix. It's a really, really good series, and I think a lot of people shy away from the term gay media, because they think that gay media is all about gay sex. And this is the one kind of mythological paradigm about queer people that I like to dispel when it comes to cis heterosexual mindsets. Queerness and queer culture is not about queer sex. Queer sex is definitely a part of queer culture, but it is a very small facet of queer culture. There is a lot about the queer experience and the queer social paradigm that exists outside of sexual interaction. So watching Pose, for example, it's a TV series that's it's loose. It's kind of inspired by Paris is Burning and the ballroom and voguing culture in America during the AIDS crisis. And it's about a group of it centers around a trans woman who basically becomes immersed in ballroom culture. And if you don't know what ballroom culture is, sure, I don't want to take up too much of the podcast explaining ballroom culture, but it's a very interesting and cornerstone facet of queer culture that originated in the intersection of the Black trans queer community. And I like to say that Black trans queer people are actually the pioneers of the human rights movement for the queer community. So it's a really great series, a series that I recommend to people who are trying to familiarize themselves with queer paradigms and queer experiences, but also movies that I'm trying to think. There's a really awesome miniseries on Netflix called I'm really struggling to remember the name of this. Tales of the City. It's got Elliot Page in it, which is always a good time. And I always recommend TV series and movies because I think that that's a medium through which a lot of people immerse themselves in other topics and other cultures and stuff. So, but I mean, if books are your thing, or if you just like more academic stuff, there's lots of things out there. I think, and it's also, they're interesting as well. You know, I think a lot of people I think a lot of cis heterosexual people like overlook queer media because they think that it's not going to be interesting to them. It's not going to be things that they can relate to. But that's often not the case. So that's a really great way to become involved in queer allyship. But also the important thing to remember is that, you know, being an ally is not a label you can give yourself. You can't say I'm an ally, and no one is going to call you an ally. Allyship is a state of maintenance in which you live, in which you agree to be a decent human being, and you agree to support the humanity of people the way that you want your humanity to be supported. That's the true meaning of allyship. It's not a label. It's not a performance. It's not a specific act. Allyship is a lifestyle, and you will never know if you've lived it or not until you can look around you and say that your net impact in the community around you has been positive. You know what I mean? And I think that that's true for all forms of allyship. It's there's been a big movement on TikTok, for example, lately about accounts or creators that refer to themselves as white allies. You know, to the Black community. And what's actually been the case is that a lot of these white content creators have co-opted Black trauma and experiences of racism in order to build their accounts and perform allyship for Black people to the express benefit of their social media engagement, which is not actually allyship at all. So, you know, that's kind of my take on allyship, to answer your question in again the most long-winded way possible. I'm so sorry. I really need to be more concise.
No. But see, Nick, this is the kind of thing that we want, you know.
Okay. I just feel like a lot of people tune in to listen to you and someone, not like 80% someone else, and then every now and again you'll be like, "That's really interesting."
Listen,
Thanks.
I'm just the host asking questions, okay? If I can sit here and listen to people's voices, it takes a lot of the pressure of being a host off of me, okay?
Great. Yeah, I'm a real talker. That's my problem.
No,
I've
that's
always
perfect.
had that problem.
Perfect. No, it's not a problem. And let me just tell you, thank you for helping us to learn these kind of things. We've had a couple of representatives of the community on the podcast, episodes to come.
Oh, cool. Who else?
Ruthie's been here.
Of course.
Candace is going to be here.
Oh, lovely.
Okay, the spoiler alert for everyone listening to this episode. Why Candace is going to be here, and Drover's going to be here as well.
Very good choices.
So I've got a huge list of people that are coming onto the podcast. Watch Holly, who is an overseas lesbian creator.
Lovely. Okay.
I got to get some international people on the podcast as well.
Obviously, yeah.
So I'm trying to get different perspectives from different representatives of the community, just to see where we can help. Because I've always been of the belief of, don't be a doer, be lekker. You know, yeah. I just, it's just a simple rule. You don't have to be a doer to your fellow human being. You don't. Yeah. It doesn't take an ounce of try hard to compliment someone today. It doesn't take an ounce of try hard to respect someone, whether they are queer, whether they are cis hetero, whether they are trans. It doesn't matter. You give that person a hi, how are you doing? You look good today, and that already lifts up their spirit. That's the belief I believe in, and just to go on this train, because I know this is going to upset people who like to use the Bible. I'm a Christian and I don't believe in the Bible, and it's weird, right? But I firmly believe that the Bible has been written and rewritten to the agenda of man, to make it more about what man wants and not what God wants. Now, this is obviously for the people who want to listen to this part. You can turn it off if you don't want to listen to this. But for me, the thing is, God does not hate. He doesn't. So why would he put queer identified people on planet Earth to hate them? It does make sense, you know?
It's it's funny you say that, because I don't think it's actually contradictory at all for you to refer to yourself as a Christian who doesn't believe in the Bible, because there's nothing illogical about that. I personally am not religious. I'm not theistic at all. And I have a lot of friends who are religious. I have lost friends who are religious because of being gay. And I have lost friends who are religious because of my criticism of religious doctrines.
That's their loss then.
I mean, yeah. Thank you. But I've always said to people, because I also get a lot of questions about I also get a lot of questions on from people on TikTok and other parts of my social media who are gay and struggling to reconcile their sexual identity with their religion, because they are religious. And I always say that there's nothing wrong with being gay and religious, and there's nothing wrong with being religious. But the important thing is to remember that religion, like all established institutions, do follow an agenda, because they are human-made institutions. Being Christian is obviously an ideology and it's a lifestyle, and that's very different. But there is also a what is the description here? There is a Christian establishment that is very different. The mainstream establishment of Christianity is not the same as just being a Christian. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many different types of Christianity. But believing in the Bible, sure, there are a lot of things that people can take away from the Bible that help them and are helpful to their relationship with their deity, and that's fine. But it's also important to remember that it is perfectly logical to not believe in the Bible. And the reason being is that the Bible that we read today there are more iterations of the Bible, just even today, than there are iterations of Christianity itself. And as we well know, there are many iterations of Christianity. And you needn't even look back that far. We always talk about Old Testament versus New Testament, but even if you look back towards, for example, 1942, right? The word gay, and in fact, the concept of homosexuality did not exist in the Bible before 1942. And a lot of people don't actually know this. And I've had a lot of people try to challenge me on this one by, pulling out Bibles pre-1942 and actually finding out that I'm right.
What is it? Leviticus. I always quote people. There's a show. I think it's West Wing.
I know exactly what you're talking about. That show where he, and he goes on being like, "How much should I sell my daughter for?"
It was Martin Sheen, and he put a homophobic person in his cabinet in her place. I always check the people that like to Bible thump. And again, as a Christian, I know there are Christians out there who are going to give me flack if they ever see this, but I don't care.
Well, Christianity is not a monolith. There are many Christians who do agree with you.
Exactly.
And the Christians who don't agree with you are part of the reason why Christianity has such a negative impact as a global establishment. There's nothing inherently negative about the institution of Christianity. It's
how people use it, Nick. I'm going to be honest with you here. I don't like to Bible thump. I don't. I use it in certain texts to help people.
Sure, yeah.
But I don't use it as a weapon to admonish someone, because that's not how I was taught. I was taught you uplift people. You help them, right? I'm not about to tell you, because the Bible says being gay is a sin. Cock, man. Don't come here with that nonsense, okay?
Yeah, and it didn't even say that before 1942.
Exactly.
And do you know why? Do you know why it started saying that after 1942? Because around the 1940s, oh gosh, I'm not really a history buff, so I'm going to kind of ballpark this one as well. Um, there was a burgeoning the gay rights movement started to kind of get momentum around the 1940s in America. Um, I mean, obviously there was always a push for gay rights in America, but I think around the 1940s it became kind of a little bit better established. And a lot of I'm trying to think. I don't know I don't want to give false information, and I don't want to give information that's too vague either. But I'm going to try my best to be to stick to concise facts here as best as I can. But there were some religious institutions in the States that that lobbied really heavily against the establishment of gay rights because it was contradictory to the secular atomic family dynamic that a lot of American conservatives and American religiocentric enterprises were major proponents of, in fact. And at the time, around the 1940s, the biggest Bible translator in the world, the biggest Bible translation company in the world, or at least the most prolific, existed in Germany, and it was the Martin Luther edition Bible at the time that was probably the most widely distributed. And so these American Christian establishments, and I mean, America, like the divide between religion and state is very blurry, even though it shouldn't be. So there was a lot of political involvement as well. They basically, I don't want to be reductive, but basically they paid off these German Bible translators to change a word that actually meant boy molester, or rather child molester, to mean homosexual, and that's also actually the origin of the stigmatization that homosexual people are child predators, because that has been a very pervasive and harmful and obviously just flagrantly untrue stereotype of the queer community for decades, and that was never a stereotype that existed before. And I love queer history because it's kind of like it's secret history. You have to kind of really look for it. And I've seen many television advertisements in America during the 40s and onwards, basically warning parents about homosexuals, grooming their children and waiting for their children in bushes on the way to school, and like all kinds of really but specifically homosexuals. Meanwhile, the statistics in America at the time actually indicated that the majority of child predators were grown men, and the majority of children who experienced statutory abuse were women. And I also the other thing I like to say is that there, like, if you are sexually abusing a child, that is not heterosexual or homosexual. That is just pedophilia. You know what I mean? Like it's being attracted. Like, children are not. I don't think that in cases of statutory assault, children should be determined by their gender, because that's like, a mentally well-adjusted adult doesn't like look at a child and sexualize them based on gender. You know what I mean? I don't know. To be honest, I don't know too much about the psychosexual the psychosexual science behind that sort of psychosexual illness myself, but that's my opinion anyway. Because I do like to mention that most statutory abuse statistics, dependent on from country to country, are actually heavily weighted towards opposite sex abuse. And obviously, there is the argument that most of the population is in fact heterosexual, and sure, that's fine, but it also is lending to the circumstance. But also, even aside from that, even if that wasn't the case, sexual abuse of any kind is not heterosexual or homosexual. It's mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I often, and that was actually a really difficult thing for me growing up, because I remember when I was, oh gosh, I'm really recalling on some old memories here. I think I was 9 or 8. I had I went to school with this guy who he must have been 3 years or 4 years older than me. So he must have been around 12, 13, or 11 at the time. And he was very effeminate, and he did actually he did end up being gay. I actually know him even today. We don't talk. I'm not friends with him, but and he was caught kissing one of his classmates, another boy. And I remember so many of the parents at our school would tell their young kids, to stay away from him because he was a pedophile. Meanwhile, this 11 or 13-year-old boy, like, how are you gonna, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's, I don't even understand the mentality. This 11 to 13-year-old boy had only ever been caught kissing like a friend of his in his grade, and he's being stigmatized as a pedophile by virtue of the fact that he did something homosexual. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of sick and pervasive mentality that exists within, the homophobic social paradigm, whereby the weaponization of these false stigmas like pedophilia or what are the other ones? I'm trying to think of all the I normally wouldn't struggle to recall all of the harmful stigmatizations of gay people, but I'm kind of like stuck on the momentum of my own story. But anyway, it actually impacted me as a kid when I realized that that I wasn't straight, because it's difficult as a child to rationalize these very serious and very intricate dynamics of sexual identity and psychosexual development. Having to think to yourself at the age of like 11, I I do I do have crushes on boys and things like that. Um, but these adults in my life have equated homosexuality to pedophilia, and even as a child you think to yourself, well, I don't want to be perceived as a pedophile. Meanwhile, like, you are a child. um and it actually really negatively impacted my relationship with queerness, and just being who I was as a kid, because I was not only afraid of being exposed for being gay and all of the abuse that would have come with that, but I also didn't want to be stigmatized as all of the other things that come with that. People believe that gay people are pedophiles, have a proclivity for substance addiction, things like that. None of which are are authentic or accurate, aside from the fact that there are statistics that show that queer people do have a proclivity for substance abuse in environments in which they themselves are abused. But that statistic exists for anyone who abuses substances, and it's what's referred to as a conditional statistic, whereby it isn't that gay people are more prone to be addicted to drugs. It's the case that gay people are more prone to gay people are more likely to experience abuse, and people who experience abuse are more likely to find solace in substance addictions. So it I guess what I'm trying to say in the most long-winded way possible is that all of the abuse and stigmatization and campaigning against gay people has created this completely interconnected web of social obstacles that gay people face from about the age that they're able to even talk. You know what I mean? And we don't actually often realize the impact that queer people, that homophobia has on young people. I would actually even go so far as to say that the people who are the most burdened by homophobia and who experience the most abuse and negative impact from homophobia are, in fact, children, and not necessarily gay children. I know lots of friends. I grew up with lots of people, lots of boys and girls when I was in high school and primary school who are not gay, who were homophobically abused, being called the F slur, being called, the D word, all kinds of awful homophobic things because of exhibited behaviors that are stereotypically assumed to be gay. You know what I mean? And it's like, and it, while it's a little bit different for them because they weren't gay, it's no less upsetting when you're a child and you don't even know what gay is. You know what I mean? But you know what straight means, and you know that you're on the outside of that because you see it all the time on TV. You see in Beauty and the Beast, it's completely romantic to be kidnapped by an anthropomorphic warthog. As long as he turns into a handsome prince and gives you a kiss in a castle at the end, like that's hunky dory. But you show so much as like Korra and Asami holding hands at the end of The Legend of Korra, and the Christian Mom Society just flies up your ass about it. You know what I mean? So like people always say like, oh, the gay agenda and exposing it to children, and it's confusing for children. And it's like, you can tell a child during communion that that a member of the church has transubstantiated the body of Jesus Christ into a cracker, and they eat it. And that's like a perfectly normal thing to explain to a child, but you can't explain. It's too confusing to explain, a trans person, like an actual living trans person with medical science and proof and things like that, or that, the very simple reality that some people are gay. Like, it's crazy. You can explain to someone that true love is when you fall unconscious from a witch's spell and a man you've met for like 2 days when you're 16 years old kisses you when you're unconscious, and that's that, and you get married and you have babies, and that's perfectly normal to explain to someone who doesn't even know what a mortgage is. But God forbid, two men hold hands on the street or get married. It's just like the craziest fucking thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with a culturally what am I trying to explain here? There's a cultural lack of cognizance when it comes to these certain issues, because when I explain it, it's like that, it does sound ridiculous. But a lot of these people who have grown up their whole lives being told that being gay is bad, or their parents abuse them for exhibiting, gender non-conforming behaviors, whatever those may be, it becomes this ingrained, almost a brainwashing. And that's why I can often tell the difference between someone who has been conditioned and indoctrinated to be homophobic and someone who is just an evil person. And there isn't a lot of, the line between the two is very blurry, because one could argue that whether you're conditioned to be that, first of all, everyone who's homophobic is conditioned to be that way. It's not a natural state of being. And, all homophobia, regardless of whether it's conditioned or not, is evil. But what I mean by that is, I often know when someone accommodates ignorant opinions, not out of a hatred for gay people, but just a lack of education. And when someone harbors ignorant opinions about gay people because they actively hate gay people. And the reason why I think it's really important to note the difference is because one of those people you can reason with. You can't reason with the other. If someone harbors hateful opinions of gay people because they hate gay people, you can't reason with someone like that. But if somebody harbors hateful opinions of gay people because they don't understand gay people, that's very different. Some people disagree with me, but I do genuinely believe that you can get somebody who will learn everything they possibly can about gay people and will still hate gay people. There's nothing you can do for some people, you know what I mean? And not all bigotry is bred by ignorance. Some bigotry is just because people are emotionally not well adjusted. And that's unfortunately just something you have to deal with. And now that I've said that, I realize that I have forgotten what your original question was, and I went on a tangent.
It's perfectly fine. We're like actually approaching the rapid fire questions, but this has been a proper insightful podcast. And thank you for taking the time to teach us about these things, because these are the things I think a lot of people misconceptualize and don't bother to try and educate themselves on. And I thank you for coming on and teaching us about these things and giving us a little bit more insight of what it is to be a member of the queer community and the challenges that you have faced getting to where you are. And from my side, Nick, you are just an absolute inspiration. Please keep being the amazing person you are. Please keep being the amazing person you are. But now we get to some quick fire questions. So are you ready?
Let's go. Yes.
Okay. Here we go. Favorite band or artist all time?
Wow, can't rapid fire this one.
Every single guest. Every single guest. I can't even remember how many guests I've gotten so far. I think 7 for 7 so far. 7 for 7.
Oh my goodness. Are you surprised though? Like, that's sure. Okay. Wow. Can we come back to that one? No, that's not the point of rapid fire.
No, you could take some time to think about it.
Okay, great.
Top 5 songs you would have to listen to if you were stranded on an island. You can only pick 5.
Oh shit. Okay, I'm really quickly opening up my Spotify because one of the lovely things about ADHD is that no matter how much you like something, if you're not like constantly thinking about it, it doesn't exist. I would have to say top 5. Hey, fuck.
I don't think that's a song, but sure.
No, I mean it could be.
It could be.
I really okay, Spotify. How do you find the most listened to songs on Spotify?
I have no idea, but you just got to pick 5.
Recently played, recently added.
I love this.
Gotta pick 5. You're really screwing me over here today.
Oh, I love it. Every single guest.
I'm literally like, I'm absolutely scrambling through.
Grant struggled, Amble struggled, Sam struggled, Nick is struggling.
Friday I'm in Love by 21-2 is a really good one. Wallowa and the Lake Monster is also one of my favorites, but I can't remember who it's by. I think it's by Sufjan Stevens, but I'm not 100% sure. And on the note of Sufjan Stevens, I really like The Mystery of Love. I've loved that song for a long time, and I recently watched Call Me By Your Name, and I saw that it was a soundtrack in that, so that was really cool.
Okay.
And I think obviously Zombie by the Cranberries, really good one.
Good one.
I'm doing better than I thought I'd be at this point, so I'm not too phased. And I think for where I'm at now emotionally, my real basic general enjoyment song is ABCDEFU by Gail.
Nice. Good one.
Is that 5?
That's 5.
Okay.
All right. Top 5 games you would take with you on an island.
Okay, so I know every person and their dog is gonna hate me for my first one.
That's
I'm
fine.
going in order of like most favorite to least favorite.
Okay, that's fine.
You know what? And I will die on this hill. I
Mhm.
really liked The Last of Us Part 2.
That's fine. Good game.
It's not without its problems for sure.
Mhm.
Both social and technical, but
It's a
I
good
really
game.
did enjoy it. It is. Second game I would take is, can it be an online game?
It can be.
I would take Final Fantasy
I
14.
thought so. I
Yeah,
knew
really
it.
good one. I mean, like, literally, I mean anything from the Final Fantasy franchise, to be honest.
Okay, you could say Final Fantasy franchise.
Okay.
You could skirt around
Okay.
that edge.
I'll do franchise. Okay, if we're still talking about franchises, though, I'd also do The Legend of Zelda.
Okay, that's a good one.
Oh, we're on 3 now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I actually have a Steam list with my most favorite games. I'm going to go through it right now. Here we go. Plague Tale. Have you played Plague Tale, right?
Ooh.
It's so good. You played it, right?
Speaking to my heart here, Nick.
Oh, the new one's coming out. I think coming out this year.
Yep. And then one more.
Okay, one more would be, sure, really fighting for last spot here. I would have to say Ghost of Tsushima.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So good. That's a who's who of list. Okay.
Yeah.
Then, most overrated game in your opinion and most underrated game in your opinion.
Okay. Again, it's time to upset people.
It's controversial.
Most
I wonder.
overrated. Most overrated. See, if I don't like something, I forget it exists. So that's that's a problem. I think the Call of Duty franchise is probably the most overrated. Is this a common answer? I feel like it might be.
This was a common answer. The other answer was my answer, and that's Skyrim.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good point, because when I think of things that are overrated, I think of things that I don't enjoy. But that's a good answer, because I did enjoy Skyrim, but I do think that it's overrated in that the hype that it receives is disproportionate to how much the game is actually enjoyable. I'm with you.
You know what upsets me most is that game has been re-released 14,000 times and it still has the same cock bugs, okay? Moving on.
Oh my God.
Most underrated game.
Most underrated game, I would have to say, is a toss-up between a game called Starbound.
Ooh.
Have you played Starbound?
Uh-huh.
I've never met anyone who's played Starbound. That's crazy. Okay, well, I'm glad that I'm not alone here. And a toss-up between Starbound and Warframe. I feel like Warframe is really underrated.
That's an interesting one. You're the first one to mention Warframe.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really good one, because Warframe has been around for a while now.
It's Warframe is an example of a game that's the development team really cares about the game, but it cares as much about the player base as well. I mean, they have their they do their live streams where I think they do their live streams every month. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've actually been in the war. Okay, so they do live streams every month, and they give away really impressive gifts, in-game gifts to the audience, like, you know, fucking Oprah throwing cars at the audience. You know what I mean? Like, they really care about their community. It's free to play. You know, their whole thing, their little slogan, ninjas play free, where you can get everything in the game, you know, if you don't mind a little bit of grind, but you can also work with the player economy that includes, for example, like you can buy platinum, I think is the real money currency or whatever. It's not pay to win. You can't, it's because you can sell things that you get in game to players for the real money currency. No other game does that I'm aware of.
Nope.
Where, because lots of games have your in-game currency and your real money currency that you pay for with real money, but you can't transfer that to other players. Whereas Warframe has been very clever in that they facilitated a player-based economy that is a hybrid of the in-game currency and the player bought currency, which I think has been really clever, and it's also given players an opportunity to get some of those paid for items without actually having to pay real money. And I really like that kind of game model. I think that a lot of games would really benefit from that, like Fortnite, for example, more so than any other game.
I'm not gonna go down the Fortnite road. I think that's a whole nother podcast in and of itself there.
Oh yeah, you asked me what my most overrated game is. I should have mentioned Fortnite. I really like Fortnite. I'm one of the few people that actually does enjoy it.
The no building.
Yeah, I prefer the no building. I am one of the people that actually does unironically enjoy Fortnite, but I do think that it's heavily overrated.
And then coming back to your first one, favorite artist or band?
My favorite artist or band. I know that she's been a bit problematic, which is probably why she wasn't my instant go-to, but I really do enjoy Sia's music. I really do. I know that she's basically been a bit of a fucking idiot on social media, with her latest movie fiasco and how she's treated the people with neurodivergence, but as far as her music is concerned, I really do enjoy her music. And it's not one of those cases where like I separate the art from the artist. I don't think that there is a way to do that with artists that are still alive. But if I'm being like, I can't. How do I put this? I don't support her as an artist because I don't really like the way that she handled her little meltdown on Twitter. But I it would be inauthentic for me to say that I don't enjoy her music. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah.
100%. All right, now comes the part of the podcast where I get to compliment you and you can't say anything about it. So listen, everybody.
I wouldn't, even if you paid me.
If you have not checked out NicholasVanJ, he's going to plug his socials now. But listen, anyone of the LGBTQIA plus community, if you have a problem, please come to this man. And straight people, you can also
just
come
tag
to this
me.
Man. Just tag him.
Bully
he will
for
sort you
hire.
out real quick. But even to the straight community, I've had conversations with Nick where he's pulled me out of ruts that I can't even begin to tell you about. He's just an absolutely wonderful human being, lovely to talk to. I'm proud to call him my friend, and I know he's not religious, but I thank God he is on earth, because then I've been blessed with this man's presence. Mr. Nick, please plug your socials for us.
I will, as soon as I tell you that I'm very moved by that very sweet that very sweet
It's all true, man.
Sorry, I'm like a little. Yeah, I'm a bit. I don't even know what to call it. It was a lot to take in all at once. I'm very
It's from
moved.
the heart.
Thank you, Rusty.
It's from the heart.
Yes. And the feeling is completely mutual, and I really appreciate it. And religious or not, I don't think that there is any greater compliment than being grateful to whatever you believe in for someone's existence. I mean, that's really sweet and special, and I appreciate that, and it's completely reciprocated, so thank you.
Much love, man. Before we start crying.
Yeah.
Before we start crying.
As for my socials, you can find me on TikTok, Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram, all at NicholasVanJ. That's NicholasVanJ. One word, and yeah, I'm available. Bully for hire. I'm being facetious. I'm not actually a bully.
Thank you,
Unless
Mr.
you're
Nick.
homophobic.
Thank you, Mr. Nick, for
welcome.
joining this episode of the Pie Oven podcast. You can find me everywhere: RustyPieLover, Instagram, TikTok, Hover, OnlyFans. Don't ask about that. YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook.
I'm also on YouTube. I forgot about that.
There you go. There you go.
I have a whole D&D series on YouTube. I just forgot.
Go check that out, everyone. Thank you so much, and we will see you in the next episode of the I was going to say the cream pie oven. I've been playing too much Minecraft.
I was going to ask about that because I saw that on Twitter and I had some questions.
I will speak about that when I host my own podcast and I'll interview me and we'll talk about that one. But I'll let you know right after. Thank you everyone so much for listening. Let us know down below how you enjoyed the podcast. Please give us your feedback. And until then, take care of yourselves and remember, we're changing the world one smile at a time. Bye-bye.
Cheers.